exploring vet school or have made a decision, yes, that is what I want to do, and that's what I'm heading for. And so for me, I guess I was just going to share my experience and then wait for Dr. Balcom to show up. Like, I'll just talk about my experience in getting in and kind of maybe help hints along. That's fine. Oh my God. And, anything else. And then you can just ask me questions. And then if there's stuff in the chat, then just somebody alert me so I check it, or you just ask it. So for me, so I went to vet school in 2004. I graduated in 2008. I went to undergrad in 95 to 99. And I went to SUNY ESF. So that's environmental science and forestry. I actually am a Jersey native. So I paid out of state tuition, but I chose that school at the time because did have pre-vet, and I was kind of interested in vet school. And it had wildlife biology at the time. So to me, that was like, okay, that makes sense. And like, there wasn't like searches like you guys have for searching for things. It was literally like a printout that had like the dots on the either end, right? And they're like, all right, here you go. So and in high school, I was interested. I did a lot of wildlife rehabilitation, like I'd volunteered. And that's kind of what really drew me towards veterinary medicine, in the sense of, I love biology. I like science. I knew that as in high school. And this just kind of fit, right? You know, that fit feeling, right? And that was like, okay, this is something I'm very interested in. And for me, for wildlife rehabilitation, I was frustrated because, you know, you can do so much, but then you get to a point, it was like, okay, we need a vet, right, to do this or to do that. And my 17-year-old brain would get frustrated with that, thinking like, well, okay, well, I'll just become a vet. So we can keep like fixing the animals all the way. And so when I went to undergrad, a similar experience you might have experienced is I actually became depressed my freshman year, because I'm from South Jersey. So it's not that it's beautiful, but it is the Garden State. So moving to Syracuse with the freaking lake effect, right? And I was like, what is lake effect? What does that even mean? And that it was gray all the time. I really like, and I think I've self-diagnosed myself as seasonal affective disorder, which is a thing. And it's like with the lack of sun, you actually can become depressed by it. And that really sucked the first time when I was 18. So I went home over Christmas break, and I would watch, again, this is before like, you know, all the stuff. So there's like cable. I'd watch everything on Discover Channel or whatever that was, Animal Planet. And I like fell in love with like Africa documentaries about the Serengeti, about Ngorongoro Crater. And I was like, I want to go there. And so I found out, and what I basically, for vet school, for me to get in, and I don't know, see if Dr. Balcom doing this, is like, it's all about pursuing opportunities. It's all about, they are looking generally, I would assume it's the same as far as what they're looking for, because everybody wants to be a small animal vet, like every 99, and pretty much 90% of them end up that way anyway. So they're trying to look for the more diverse aspects of veterinary medicine. At least Cornell was. So Cornell was when they wanted to produce other veterinarians, right? So in public health, large animal, equine, research oriented, One Health, right? Public health. And so that probably is what one of the main things that got me into Cornell, because I would pursue all these different things. And so in undergrad, I did study abroad for a year. I got a scholarship to study abroad. And that, though, prevented me from doing my prereqs. Hello, Dr. Balcom. How are you? Oh, you got the damn mute.
Sorry, my computer takes 10 minutes to turn on, and I always forget that. So
no problem.
But I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, no, not a problem at all. We're just chatting.
I figured you'd chat.
Yeah, right. So then, because I had gone away for a whole year, I was like, well, I guess I really can't focus on my prereqs. At the time in undergrad, I wasn't really aware of what exactly I had to do. I was just like, I know I need to do some physics and some organic chemistry. And those seemed like enough to have my plate to complete, that I didn't look farther beyond that. And so because I was away from my junior year, I was like, all right, well, I guess I can't do prereqs. I guess I'm not going to go to vet school. Like, all right, no big deal, because I'm really into wildlife biology and getting my biology degree, and then maybe getting my PhD or master's or whatever and doing wildlife research. I wanted to be Jane Goodall. I wanted to be, Diane Fossey. Well, not Diane Fossey, she got murdered, but like her, I guess. Yeah, don't do that. So then I graduated and I worked. This is what you also don't want to do. So I moved to Boston because that seemed cool, right? Because I was like, I've never lived in a city. Syracuse was supposed to be the city that I moved, like I was going to have my fun city experience in. I was like, this doesn't count, right? Because I'm like, oh, it has a zoo. It's got an airport. Must be a metropolis. And it wasn't. So I moved to Boston, but I made $25,000 living just outside of Boston. Yeah, exactly. Don't do that. So that was a fun experience. I lived in my withdrawal, like overdraft. And my parents also got divorced like right then. And I'm the youngest. They're like, bye, we're getting divorced. Like I moved to Boston. I was like, I'm literally on my own. This is so cool. So I would get paid and then I pay off my bills. And then I would be in like my negative amount that I had of $500. And so that also is going to be part of my talk here, is like the financial part of vet school, because I wish somebody had communicated that a little bit with me, because everything was just like, oh, it's hard to get into vet school. It's really hard to get into vet school. And like, that's not what you want to tell me. Cause I'll be like, well, yeah, I'm gonna work harder to get into vet school. Cause like, you don't get to tell me what to do. But I wish somebody was like, hey, guess what? You might not be able to like go on vacation.
It's hard to get out from under vet school.
Oh, whatever. So, but I made and like in that nonprofit, there was very few, for scientists, the grants were few and far between. It wasn't like NIH or some high grade. It was like, this is like, we paid them a little bit of money for them to take. It was Earthwatch. It's a cool nonprofit organization. You can go and like volunteer to work with sea turtles, or you can ride a camel in the Gobi Desert. You can do tigers and blah, blah, blah. So, but I would be the one coordinating all these people and giving them. So we'd be like, here's 25 random people, and we're going to give you a little grant, right? And I was like, ew, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to work for a grant for my whole life so that I can live. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go to vet school. And there was somebody else was applying to vet school. And I was like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, all right, let me just figure this out. And I was like, okay, what does Cornell need? I chose Cornell, and purely and only because it was the closest. And I didn't want to move far away. Like I couldn't afford that, right? We already know I had no money. So I was like, okay, Cornell seems good. UPenn, and I think I liked Michigan because of their large animal part. And then like I knew I wouldn't get in the first year because I'm a realist, right? And I was like, I didn't think that would be the case, because I just kind of like, I decided like, okay, I'm going to go to vet school. 2 years later, I got in. So the first year I didn't get in. But then I met with Cornell after that. Like I didn't get in, and I was like, okay, fine. I only applied there. So I was like, I don't think I was going to, but I know money to apply. Cause if you apply to, it's a lot of money. It's like $300, $400, right? It's pop. Aside also from all the GREs. Oh my God, don't talk about that. And then, so I was on the waiting list. I was 11th on the waiting list. So I was like, sweet. All right. I can do that. I think I can do better next time. And they're like, what do you need to do? And they're like, you've never worked in an actual vet hospital. Because I've done wildlife rehab, I've done research, I've done this, I've done that, everything else. And I was like, fine, I'll do that. So at that point, but this is what I was doing. My life was vet school. So I worked as a lab technician at Syracuse University doing research with mice. I worked part-time at a vet hospital as a vet tech assistant. I volunteered at the Syracuse Zoo on the weekends. I took physics, and I did something else. But basically every piece of my life for, my early 20s was to get into vet school. And I showed that, right? So that's what Cornell wants, at least Cornell. I don't know about other vet schools, is like, okay, whatever experience you have, you need a letter. And for you need to like kind of check all these boxes. And that's kind of what it was, is like, I was willing, as I felt like, what is that? What's that show? What's that? Madagascar, where like the tiger goes through like the little tiny little hole, the burning hole. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like, it's like Cornell would just make the hole smaller and smaller and like light it on fire. I'd be like, okay, I want to do it. So yeah, and that was kind of getting into vet school. And when I applied the second time, I actually applied for the DVM PhD program. Those were really smart people. Yeah, I somehow thought I knew it wasn't them. And like, they were like, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not that smart. Like, I'm not that Really smart people. And they normally say, we're not going to let you in if you apply to both. But they're like, we'll let you into this one. You can't do that one. I'm like, well, that one's paid for and free. I want to do that one. And that's my story.
Oh, okay. I guess it could be my turn. I could tell my story. I was non-traditional, I guess, in my journey to vet school as well. I did not do the 4 years, which was cool. So let's see. I was in high school. I was going to be a vet since I was 9, of course. Loved horses. I was going to be a horse vet since I was 9. I got through high school, did well. I went to Delaware Academy, actually over on that other mountain that you see. Graduated, went to college down south and said, you know what? I'm not smart enough to take chemistry and physics and upper level biology. I am nowhere near smart enough to do this. And I don't want to work that hard. So I'm going to go be a theater major, which is what I graduated with. I took a year off during college to ride my horses and took chemistry that year at Delhi to get my GE done, which ended up being good because I needed it later. But it was, not on the radar. And then I ended up working over at Glimmer Glass in Cooperstown at the opera company there and making very little to no money. But I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I was pretty lost. So I quit my job and went to training and riding horses full time for a year and managing a horse barn. And while there, I was taking care of these horses and we had some emergency stuff. This is a little tragic sounding, but I literally had a horse die in front of me while waiting for the vet who was like 2 hours away to come out. And I was like, that was kind of my moment. I was like, never again am I going to just stand here and watch an animal die and not be able to at least help it, or at least euthanize it. Done. And I decided to go to vet school. But like I said, I had one prerequisite. I had chemistry. So I actually went to SUNY Delhi. I did not do the vet tech program because I didn't need a vet tech degree. I needed prerequisites. I already had a bachelor's degree. So I actually did an associate's in science. And between that's back when they offered organic both semesters every year and physics both semesters every year. I already had calculus under my belt, but I knew, and I'd gone to a tour at Cornell, and they told me straight out, they were like, my undergrad was at William and Mary, which is this kind of nice school down in Virginia. And they're like, ooh, William and Mary. And I'm like, yeah, that's not where my science is coming from. My science comes from Delhi. They're like, okay, well, and I'm not knocking Delhi in this, but there is a little bit of a thing. Higher level schools weight a little higher depending on your curriculum. So they gave me the idea that if I was at Delhi, I better do really well with my grades and work really hard. Because if I do a bare minimum at a school like Delhi, it would not look as good as working because I knew I'd be applying against kids who were at Cornell, at William and Mary doing biology. So I beefed up my schedule. I ended up going through like Calc 4, which was awful, but I was just like, I need to look like I want to do this. Physics, I ended up having to scrape together. Genetics was through Stuco. Animal nutrition was through North Carolina. Biochemistry was through Minnesota. So there was a lot of pulling the pieces together. But, I worked my butt off. The nice thing was I was a little older, so I was willing to focus and work my butt off because when I was 21, that's why I was a theater major, because I didn't want to work my butt off. It took me 2 tries as well. Unlike Dr. Murphy, and I strongly recommend you do what she did, talk to them. When I didn't get in the first time, I just kind of licked my wounds. I did realize my transcripts hadn't gotten sent before they were supposed to, which didn't help. And I still had some credits open, but I also had very little experience outside of horses. I had done a little bit of work with a vet, but I'd mostly just ridden and trained horses. So I set about to get as much other experience as possible. I rode around with actually Delhi Animal Hospital with one of Dr. Murphy's graduate buddies, with Dr. Aragon, and learned all about mixed animal, dairy especially. I went on a volunteer trip to Costa Rica and Nicaragua where I did like one of those spay neuter clinics. So I worked with small animals. Oh, what else did I do? I don't even know. Anything I could do. I volunteered with GoFar, which was the spay neuter clinic out of Oneonta. So that way, even though I was totally wanting to be an equine vet, I was like, let's get some small animal. And I went and milked on a dairy farm. Like, that sounds crazy, but I went once a week and
Me
worked with kids.
too. I
Yeah,
totally did too in Walton for summer. I worked in an organic vegetable farm and I milked cows at 4 a.m.
Yeah. I would go. I luckily didn't have to be there till about 6, but I went and once a week went and milked on a dairy farm. And so I got all these different experiences and put that together on my application. The dairy farmer was one of my references. Like, some schools only let you do 3 references. Cornell let me at least do that time a whole bunch. I think I applied to 6 different schools at that time. I was also a little bit more realistic about where I applied, because originally my first year I applied to like Cornell, Penn, Tufts, basically along the Eastern Seaboard, which is kind of the most concentrated populations, especially for state schools. So it's a lot harder to get into those schools. They may be ranked a little higher, plus also more people apply. So the more people that you're applying against. So I spread it out a little bit: Michigan, Louisiana, Purdue. And between that, all my experiences, having all my transcripts apparently submitted on time, I did get in to Cornell and a few others, and got some interviews. So that was really exciting. And that was that. I did not apply to a PhD program because I definitely was not one of those people. And when I got there, I realized how smart even just the other students there were. I worked really hard, and it just came so much easier to the rest of them. And I was like, is it because I'm old? Not that I was that old. I was older, but it was very humbling.
Yeah.
It was one of the most humbling experiences I'd ever been through, to realize I could study for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and still just get a C on a test.
And be like,
yeah.
okay.
But you do at that point in your life, because I did not have any aspirations to go really beyond. You always toy with the idea of like a residency or a PhD while you're there, but then you're like, meh. But you do realize that at that point, just doing your damnedest, working really hard and getting C's and B's. I mean, I did graduate with over a 3.0 there, but by the skin of my teeth, but still, I was still like at the bottom of my class, because we were separated by like 0.01 points in our GPA. That was insane, but these kids were super smart. But it was very humbling, but it was awesome. I actually really enjoyed that school when I wasn't hurling, because I was so stressed out about my grades, and I loved clinics. Clinics was and that's where I did my best, which always made me feel better. I was like, well, even if I don't take my tests well, at least when I show up to my clinics, the doctors liked me. And even in small animal, even though that was not my jam, they were like, you're great, do it, go have fun. I mean, they didn't say you're great, but they don't usually say you're great, but you get the thumbs up. So that's nice.
You get the vibe. You're like,
Yeah,
okay,
you get the vibe.
I'm kind of on the in. Okay, good.
Actually, I got
students.
kudos from Dr. Sharon Center, which was she told me, she's like, you need to keep going. And I was like, and Dr. Sharon Center, Dr. Murphy knows what this means. She is a small animal internist. She is insane, but she is like, I don't even know, intense, crazy. So getting props from her was probably one of the biggest highlights of clinics in my life. So even if the academics wasn't my suit, shining in clinics made me feel a lot better about myself. And that was that. So and I said, it took 2 strikes. I wasn't shocked. I mean, again, humbling to not get in when you're used to always being told yes. And then all of a sudden you're told no, and you're like, oh, okay. But it was worth it. It was at that point, I knew it was the only direction I really wanted to go to that would make me happy. So even swallowing the massive amounts of debt that I'm still swallowing and dealing with, haunting me for the rest of my life, I don't know what other direction I could have gone in that would have made me happy. So I at least have that. Though if I hadn't gotten in that second time, I was going to start looking at master's programs and go a different direction with my life, because I didn't know if I had a third round in me. And financially, applying a third time would have been awful, because it was really expensive. So that school and money are it's shocking.
I would agree with that, as with the clinics too, as far as, and also the really smart people, is that was where I shined as well, right? Because it's like, I think even large animal, or even coming from Delhi, like you guys are used to kind of, rolling up your sleeves and getting the work done. And so these students who were excelling and like, oh, even they're like, oh, I don't really need to study or study as hard or whatever. By the time they got into clinics, though, they don't know how to work because they've been in undergrad their whole life and then they didn't work and then they went straight into vet school. So they don't understand what like 10-hour days are, 12-hour shifts are, standing up all the time, generally being quiet and not being in the way kind of thing, yet being ready and useful when needed, whereas I think Dr. Balcom and I probably like mastered that, and then that proves, and it's almost very like a technician, like kind of sense, and that proved to be very useful in clinics. Do you guys have any questions right now? Did that bring up any questions or?
What are your general thoughts, I guess, guys? Like, what do you want to know? I mean, there's lots to know, but we can go about 20 different directions. So
what do you think of the bachelor program at SUNY Delhi, and then the branching off of the veterinary program with that school that we have?
So I think being a technician going to vet school is kind of awesome. It also gives you some edges because you can literally like, my roommate was a tech, and actually I had two other friends who, one was one was year below me, who graduated from SUNY Delhi, got their technical degrees, and they were able to work in the hospital as technicians, or another worked at a local hospital as a technician, and were paid as technicians. So that was really useful. Our bachelor's degree it's not truly designed as a pre-vet program. It can get you there. You may have to do a little bit of extra. It is very clean, I think, to do the articulation with Ross through our bachelor's program. If you're looking at more of the state schools, they just have more prereqs. And some of them had even crazier, like Cornell didn't even have the craziest prereqs. There were other places that wanted other weird biologies or a certain amount of business, which you guys actually have the business. So you need to be realistic to know that I think our bachelor's program can definitely get you some of the good experience and can help set you up, but you still may be doing some extra work on the side, like I had to do, and pulling classes over the summer or from other places, especially depending on where you want to go. If you have a list, you need to really research your prereqs, because like I said, some schools want 2 semesters of organic. Some want biochemistry with a lab, without a lab. Michigan wanted some really weird science class that I found at Binghamton, but I ended up getting into Cornell, and I told them I'd take it the summer before I went if I got in, and didn't have to. But so it depends on the program you want. I think it definitely can get you there, but you may have to do extra work. And especially since we are not quite at the point yet where we're offering all of the prerequisites every semester, every year, which can make things a little tricky. So it will get you there, but it may not be clean and semester. You may be doing extra work over your summers or taking an extra semester after. So
yeah, I agree with Dr. Balcom in the sense of, so if I were to do it all over again, I would, again, where I started, and is there still VMCAS, which was like the veterinary medical colleges of the Northeast, something?
Yeah, and I think the VMCAS is a lot more streamlined. Like everybody uses it now. Like,
okay.
And it's actually fewer. The application process is, I think, a little more streamlined than even when I did it.
Okay.
VMCAS is still fairly new, but
some organization or AAVSB or I don't even remember what it was. And I don't know if this still exists, but somebody made a publication that was a book back in the day of all the vet schools, which at the time there was only 27 vet schools in the US, and all of their requirements. So like I bought that book, and that's kind of where I started. Like, okay, what do I need to do? Right. And so then I was like looking up that, and I think they also had the application cost, which of course then that starts like, right, I'm going to apply to 10 schools. Oh wait, never mind. I don't have, $9,000. So that kind of was what decided what I was able to do with, okay, work backwards. And then, okay, what are, so then you fill in, what are your prereqs, when you're going to take them, how are you going to take them? And then every other honestly waking minute should be spent getting animal experience. I mean, depending on how I don't know, like how driven you are. I would say something like the schools like Cornell or UPenn or Davis, right? They're going to be more competitive. So they're going to be looking for that diversity of experience. They're going to be looking for the caliber of the experience. And they're also going to be looking at then the caliber of the academics. And I think then the schools that are, say, quote, easier to get into, and when I say that, it doesn't really talk about quality, at least yet in my experience. Granted, I'm not really sure about the new grads just because I haven't really been working in practice for 6 years. But when I was in practice, the vets from Ross were awesome. I worked with a couple of them in practice, and they were, awesome. They would come and do their clinical, like some of their clinical rotations in different practice, like different schools in the US. So some came to Cornell, some came whatever. I think the ones that came to Cornell were like the top of the top, and they were scary from Ross because they like had a chip on their shoulder and something to prove. So I was like, oh, hey,
Oh, they were so anti us at first. They'd be like, oh, well,
they're
you're
like, hey, cool, welcome. They're like, hey. I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. Like, okay, cool. I'm just gonna go over here and mop the floor. So I got to kind of work for the goal and try to like, okay, what's going to work for my plan? What can I do? And then what experience can I get? If you do get experience, I would recommend also getting a letter from them after you just write, around when you're leaving. Don't wait until you apply to vet school because one, they're not going to remember you. Sorry. And two, it's fresh in their minds and you have it. Because I think at least Cornell back in the day, any place you said you had to have a letter backing it up. I don't know if that was the case for you, Dr. Balcom.
Not every place. We had to have a minimum of 3 and we could do like up to, I think I was able to submit 6. At that point, the VMCAS only let you do 3. And now I don't know how it works because it's all online. So like they submit your name and they have, and then like the application emails the person a link. So it's a little trickier now. So you may have to remind them who you are, remind them when you were there, what you did, depending. And as I said, I don't know because I just know that last recommendation I wrote, I literally got a link from the college they were applying to. So it may be different. I mean, that's great. And what she's saying is, and that's kind of a great thing in general for a recommendation. So you always could send it back to them and be like, hey, this was the reference you wrote me last year. Do you mind submitting it via email to this school? That may work. But yeah, and with your references, you need to be smart about it, especially if you're limited to 3. Because as I said, some places limited you. Make sure it's not, you have to try to show a breadth of experience in a very sometimes small way. So showing, just being like, oh, the vet, the tech, and the whomever that I worked with in practice at the same practice. Well, that's nice. It probably wouldn't fly as much as the vet you worked with, plus a professor you did like research with, plus something else. And the experience, varying your experience. Like Dr. Murphy, you have to make yourself look interesting. A lot of people are applying there with the same GPA as you, with the same degree as you. Well, maybe, but theater degree gave me no. It was a little different, though there was another theater major in my class, which was funny. But what makes you stand out and be unique? What electives did you take? Like I said, I didn't really want to do small animal, but I made sure I got small animal experience. If you have a chance to go and do something different, work with wildlife or reptiles or public health, that's a good one. They love to see that right now. Or like a One Health initiative, anything like that. Even if that's not ultimately what you want to do, showing that you have this broad palette, you're trying different things, that you're interesting and unique will help you stand apart. Because like I said, at the end of the day, your GRE and I didn't say this, but your GRE and your GPA, they matter at the beginning, but they usually don't make or break your decision at the end. It's kind of like, for the most part, you meet a certain GRE and GPA, you've passed through phase 1. Maybe it will come up again when they're deciding between 2 people, but that gets you through phase 1. Then phase 2 is what makes me stand out, or what am I going to bring to this program that 20 other people or 100 other people aren't bringing? And that's that's why, when you look at the electives you could take next year as a second year, or during your bachelor's, or when you go, even if this isn't the direction. I had a friend who did sheep research. She didn't really care about sheep, but, or research, but it was an interesting thing for her to do, and to show research, et cetera. So, don't do something you necessarily hate, but stepping outside your wheelhouse can be really make you interesting and useful. So.
And then back to your original question, as far as the bachelor. So it's, I mean, it's hard to really say just because it's a new bachelor's, but for the, at least for the associates, right, we definitely have had people go on to lots of different things. I had whatever classmate at Cornell who went to Delhi, and she was very interested in lab animal medicine. And like day one, I didn't even know about Delhi, I didn't know anything. And she was like, oh, I went to Delhi, blah, blah, blah. Now she's a boarded lab animal vet. She actually is like the head of University of Pittsburgh lab animal program. So it can happen. And again, with the Ross articulation, I mean, that's kind of cool in the sense of you kind of have basically guarantee. The drawback with that is that it's expense, right? So you're paying for that. So Ross is a for-profit vet school. Again, a good school, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. So you have to really look at that, as far as that's probably going to be the most expensive choice, I would think, just in the sense of the tuition itself, but then also, you know, the thought of traveling back and forth, you know, all that stuff is going to create cost. And I would really look at that to see, okay, at the end of the day, you know, looking at about what is a vet going to make. So starting salaries it depends, but I think it's between, I don't know, 70 to 90. 90 is like on a good day.
Unless maybe you're at a high-end small animal place in the city.
Yeah. So
But
you're
then your cost of living is a slightly different story.
So the problem is the starting salary as a veterinarian has not really gone up in 10 years, but the cost of vet school has doubled or tripled. So when I graduated Cornell, when I started in 2004, the tuition, in-state tuition, just tuition, was $20,000. And then 2004. And then it raised about $1,000 a year. It was 24,000. So when I graduated in 2008, my tuition just for Cornell, granted, I was super poor, so I had to take out every loan. I wasn't super poor, but there's a difference between that and what I was. But like, still, I didn't have income. I was independent. I was 27 when I started vet school, which is not that old, but it's hilarious starting with like 22-year-olds who were like not used to working hard. Anyway, so that's something to consider, guys, is so because I didn't have any money, I graduated from ESF. I had $18,000 in debt from ESF in 1998. Now, granted, that's when the APR was really high. It was like 8%, which is super stupid high for student loans. And you're like, APR, what do you mean? Like, guess what? You guys are gonna have to learn that stuff because it's coming soon. So I deferred. I was like, woo, defer my loans, la, la, la. So then, from 2000 to 2008, I basically deferred my undergraduate loans. Okay. So then when I graduated, I had $18,000 in debt. On top of, from Cornell, I graduated. And again, this is tuition and everything else that I could take out. I had some scholarships, not much, was 130,000. So I was 150,000 total in debt for undergrad.
That was 2008, right?
2008.
Okay.
And so that's for undergrad and vet school, $150,000. So my loans with that was basically $1,000 a month. So since 2000, I've been paying $1,000 every month for 10 years, except for since the pandemic. That's the good part of the pandemic, is I'm able to actually save some money to do that. So I don't even know what your loans would be what that payment would be.
I mean, I graduated 6 years after Dr. Murphy. I graduated, I had to do the full loan thing too. I was independent. I'd come home on the weekends and work. But it was only me paying my rent. Mom was not paying my rent. God bless lucky classmates who had parents who bought them a house or paid their rent while they're there, or had already paid for their undergrad. They only had to pay for vet school. I probably had about 16,000 to 20,000 in undergrad. And then I walked out of Cornell with $200,000 6 years later. So basically when I graduated, and I had deferred because you can't freaking afford student loan payments while you're in vet school. So probably total of $220,000 6 years later. And then you can sign up for like the income-based payments, things like that. That is really helpful because you can make the payments, but it doesn't even like put a dent in your interest, which is all stuff you'll learn about. So people like income-based and I get forgiven in 20 years or maybe 10 years through public service. But you still get taxed, but that's a whole nother story. So it is very expensive. And if you go further, if you go into a residency, things like that, you may ultimately get a job that pays you more money, like $150,000 a year, maybe even 200, depending on where you end up. But you're sitting on a lot of debt. And it just accumulates, and then you're faced with it. So your first year's out, and I'll say, I mean, thank God, I remember saying this to this group like a few years ago. This makes me sound so old fashioned, but thank God I had a partner and ended up married, because he helped make my quality of life better, because paying anywhere from $600 to $1,200, depending on where my income-based payment hit. I basically was paying my student loan, and he fortunately was able to pay the mortgage. So, not that you need to go out and get married to survive. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, unfortunate reality is if you have a partner, it can be helpful for your quality of life.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, but it is true, because the person that I turned to and said, "Hey, I think I want to go to vet school," and they were like, "What? You're crazy. I'm now married to." Right? Like, okay, sure, whatever, Katie.
Yep.
So it is true. I don't know if I could have. I mean, I probably would have, but then my debt would have just been that much larger. I don't know.
And
So those are things to consider, right? I mean, I know nobody ever said anything about that to me. I'm like, duh, like, why didn't I think about it? But that's the youth part of it, and then you're not thinking about other parts of your life. Would I've done something differently? Like, it's hard to say, but I think other options could be, or smarter options, right? Because to me, it's like a 2-year degree. There's so much potential opportunity, but you have to be able to move, and go and find those opportunities. And that's, if you aren't willing to do that, then that can be a problem. But it's possible to do as much, if not cooler stuff than a vet, but yet not have half the debt, half the burden, and half the responsibility, and hopefully half the stress. Where if you go and work at find like a really good practice, something like Upstate Vet Specialties in Latham, that then has the opportunity for techs to find a passion in all the different fields, and then potentially become specialized in it through time and through, it's not a cost, right? It's the VTS is just time. And I think taking a test, it's more than that, but what a great way. Cause you can basically almost do what a lot of vets do, but half the debt. So like, there are other ways to get to the goal of it, right? So that's the question, like, do I have to be a vet, right? Now, and you can see where like, the pile of shit, the shit pile, right? So it all rolls downhill. Now the vet's here at the bottom. So do you want to be right? So whenever my texts were like, hey, anything that happens, it is all my fault, right? Because I'm overseeing this. I'm the medical specialist overseeing this thing, so that, are you okay to have that burden? And that is part of a burden that for me made me leave practice. Now, granted, it was my own burden that I put on myself. But doesn't that sound familiar, friends? Right? That it's not
kind of the personality that goes along with being in this field.
I was in therapy once crying about a dog that I did surgery on. They're like, "What happened? Did it die?" I'm like, "No, it lived." It's like, okay. But it was like that. That's how invested I was in these patients. I remember somebody came to Delhi working. I'm like, "Welcome to Delhi. Like, we don't have to worry about animals dying. Yay!" Like, it's just like, for me personally, it was too much. Like, that was part of what wore me out, was that, okay. And I kept having babies, but that did it too. Cause that's also another thing, is just having children. I mean, that if that's something you want to do, it gets harder and harder to do that. So that's something in my 20s I was never thinking about, right? I was like, I'm going to adopt and save the earth. And then I'm making 3. So we're both out. So yeah, that's the thing. What are your questions, guys?
Have we terrified you? Are you like really excited now?
It is a challenge. It's not easy, right? I mean, but it's a passion. That's the thing is, as veterinary profession is in general, is a passion, that it's a calling, right? And that's what I love about this profession is, in general, most of us want to be here in general, a larger portion than other professions. And there's a common underlying kind of draw that brings us together. And so that you don't have in other professions. And that's really cool. When they talk about happiness, they talk about, ideally finding purpose and finding meaning in your life. Now, that doesn't have to be your work. But if you can somehow dovetail your work that it gives you purpose. I go to work every day. I've done this for every day of my life, and I'm happy to go to work. I don't think like, oh my God, I got to work. Right. I love working because I'm an idiot. But I love, I love Delhi. I love that medicine. Like I love medicine. I love solving problems. So that's what you have to find, because if you're not going to find that, then you're going to be not happy. That's the most important thing.
And kind of like Dr. Murphy said, it may not necessarily be in the place you think it is. That's the other great thing about this profession, is there are a lot of different avenues that you guys can take. So whether it's being a vet tech in practice, being a specialty tech, or then again, are you using this and you're going to end up using it as a stepping stone to a master's that takes you somewhere, or a PhD, or something, other kind of work, like I said, public health, government, education. There are a lot of avenues, and you can also change. That's the other thing, is as long as you keep giving yourself building blocks, you can work and be like, you know what, I am getting burnt out. I am unhappy, or this just doesn't fit. But without leaving veterinary medicine, you can find another job. Now, one of the biggest catches is the flexibility, being able to go somewhere, because this is one thing I do run into, is people, especially students who they have family somewhere they're like, I want to stay here, but I want to do this. And I'm like, here and this may not always gel. So it does help if but there are a lot of options you can go and do and experience that you may never, I never really planned on teaching at Delhi. I always liked teaching, but I was going to be in an equine. I was going to be working at like Rhinebeck or something like that, some big fancy equine hospital. And then, I got married and I had to think about my husband's needs too, and my children. And so, things shifted a little bit. But there's a lot of directions you can go. I will say a lot of students want to know why to do a bachelor's program, and this isn't necessarily do a bachelor's, but the nice thing about getting your bachelor's degree is if you ever do see more education in your future, it does give you a stepping stone there. Otherwise, you'll just have to go back, which is fine. There's nothing wrong. It's just can be a little trickier. So if you are like, oh, I'm really thinking about this, it does give you a stepping stone to jump off into something else. For example, getting hired as an instructor at SUNY Delhi, in order to be at a faculty level, you need to at least have a bachelor's so that you can work towards your master's, and other directions too. So.
Yeah, I like so working just in clinics specifically, it's not really going to help you as far as increasing your cost as a licensed vet tech, but it does expand your opportunities for employment elsewhere in case you want to explore something else. Or because again, with techs, unless you're in a metropolitan area, you're basically going to be moving kind of laterally over time, or you hopefully work at a place that values you and pays you as you mature and pays you for your value. But if you don't have a location where there's a lot of opportunity for this movement, or a big, huge hospital that, has a kind of growth chain like that, it makes it hard. That's where the bachelor's comes in to me, because it opens up wildlife biology, it opens up research, it opens up lab animal, it opens up anything with biology, teaching, all of those different things, or even again, different jobs in different locations. And you guys are so young. You think like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is my path and I'm going to do this. And that's totally awesome. And you should have that. But this is the time also where you're also not supposed to have any idea what the hell's going on, and if you're in the right place, or am I making the right choice, and oh my God, right? But you could think tomorrow, like I'm going to be like I remember somebody started like, I'm going to be a cardiologist, day one of vet school, and I was like, wow, that's really specific. Like, okay, you go. And he ended up being an equine vet, and I don't even think he had equine experience. He just fell into it, So if veterinary medicine is like, that's your calling, that's your passion, and it may or may not include being a vet, but within this profession, there are so many cool things. That's what you need to do, is find that thing that's like, yeah, this is my jam, dentistry or dermatology or whatever it is, find your jam, because that's what's going to bring you that happiness. And then you can then pursue whatever the specialty or whatever you need for that, you know, either through a vet tech route or through DVM. So I see Lisa's here. Hey, Lisa, unless she's hopefully like, is she listening? Are you listening to us, Lisa? Hello. I actually worked with Lisa in practice. So when I was a baby vet, she led me. I did not want to practice in vet school at all. I was definitely into public health. I wanted to then get my MPH. I aborted the PhD because I was like, that's for smart people. And I was really interested in public health. And oh, she leave? Oh, there she is. I was like, she's
No, I wanted to pop in and listen because I feel like listening to our DVMs here will help you guys that are considering going into the bachelor's program and where am I going to go for internships. I thought it would be very helpful to listen in. So that's why I'm here. And yes, I did work with Dr. Murphy in practice, and it was a really cool experience we had together.
lots of laughs. Lots of laughs. I just have tears in my eyes just thinking about it. Okay. So what was it? Something else I was gonna say. I forget. All right. Whatever. So do you guys have specific questions? Like, and again, you can always like follow up with us if you have specific questions for things. I'm trying to think of like processes we did or what, but I think it's basically like trying to figure out the cost as best you can and then limiting to what you really want to pursue, just unless you're, you know, rich, and then going for it. So, I mean, I felt like for me, it's like, okay, if I'm aiming for this, which to me, that school seemed to be the pinnacle of what I was aiming for, then if I didn't make it, like, okay, then I end up here. And that's like, I'm still okay there. Like I'm fine with that. So it was like, okay, I'm going to shoot for the moon, you know, wherever I end up. And for me, my plan was 4 years at the time. And I was 22, I think, when I decided, or 23 maybe when I decided it. And I did two years. Are there programs you guys are interested in looking at, or other like bachelor's oh, that was it. It's the internship. Duh. That's the cool thing about Delhi is the semester-long internship opportunity, but it's such a freaking cool opportunity, but you have to really take advantage of it. Because this is where, you know, the rubber meets the road in the sense of, hey, this is your education. It's a 12 credit internship. It's basically like in the sense of like, here's an opportunity for you to really do something really cool. And you have 2 years at least to plan for it. Cause yeah, finances are part of it. But if you get all the way to that bachelor's and you're like, I can't afford it. Well, it's like, well, come on. Like, didn't you not know you had a really cool opportunity? And you don't want to graduate and be like, wow, I really could potentially like, you know, could have done something cooler. So we have a student at the Miami Zoo, you know, and then that's taken a risk, kind of going to the zoo during the pandemic. We're just going to do it. And she did. And she was a researcher, like I see many of you are. So she did her research. She looked into her programs and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa. And then was said, okay, then she got to the point where Greg, I just got to make the decision. And she did, and she's giving rhinos baths, baby rhino just born, getting bathed by her. She's like, I did this with the banteng, I did this. She's in the African hoofstock. The Miami Zoo, I mean, that zoo is an awesome zoo with what they have. It's very set up well for their interns. Like we all met and then they did a good evaluation of her. And they were basically like, you're awesome because she was a vet tech, right? Not because she's a vet tech, but because she's a vet tech, right? She's one of the best interns. And they're like, now you need to start pushing yourself where you start trusting your judgment. The woman was like, I trust you around dangerous animals. And they were like, the HR lady was like, for her to say that, for this person to say that about an intern means a lot. And like the student was just like, you know, you could tell they were like, you know, and I was like, all right, now, you know, and she's like, but she's also very much like trying to follow the rules, right? So, but that's what you do as techs, right? It's like, okay, I got this thing, I got to fit in between. How do I expand myself and grow? So I'm just super proud of her. So there's such good opportunity.
And I just want to add with this particular student, when I was working with her about through the process of finding an internship, she had a log a logbook that she kept, and she applied to maybe 15 zoos across the country. And she got offers at various, probably about 3 or 4 different facilities. One was in Texas. I believe one was up in somewhere, maybe Wisconsin area, but just all over the place. And she actually got to choose where she wanted to go. And we went back and forth a lot, talking about the pros and cons of all the different areas. Miami was a big, scary city where she had never visited. And she's, grew up on a farm in this area and wanted to take this opportunity because she knew she wasn't going to have this opportunity maybe for another couple of years. So kudos, and she's loving it. I think I just heard also that she's working with a baby giraffe as well that just was born. So, I mean, how cool is that?
I mean, I think that the moral of the story is this, you got to go, unfortunately, get to vet school, you got to go above and beyond, right? But you think you all know that by this point. And just really seeking opportunity. But then just at this point in your life is also expanding your horizons, right? You guys are now, wow, holy moly. Were there 2 or 1? There we go. Okay. I was like, look how big they're getting. Holy moly. But push yourselves, right? So especially if you've not really ever left kind of your boundaries of home and or Delhi, it's time to start doing that, seeking those things out, stepping beyond your comfort zone. I mean, that's part of adulting, right? But then because eventually it forces itself upon you, right? Your comfort zone. And so it's better to practice that and take advantage of that in a safe environment, like an internship, to explore what you're into. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
And we're done.
That just to follow up is it's the whole broad. I know it can be hard. It can be scary. Money is a thing, but again, trying to step outside that wheelhouse, show unique experiences. Also, like I said, you never know what may end up appealing to you. And I understand, trust me, that money is always a factor, but if you can figure out a way to make it work, it saddens me a little when I talk to people like, oh no, I'm just going to stay close to home at the same place I've been. And not because there's anything wrong with that, just because this is your chance before you get locked into a job to go out and do a little exploration. So, it's taking advantage of those opportunities, and there's a good chance you'll figure out a way to make it work. Usually, as long as you work hard, it usually works out. Little credit card debt hanging over you for a little while isn't, it's kind of a way of American life. It'll get taken, well, be smart, but still.
We're just realist guys, sorry. But I mean, I think for me, I can say I'm happy with my path. I'm happy where I ended up. I'm happy with all the choices that happened. And in graduating, I graduated in 2008 when the economy crashed. And I was going to go into public practice. And then, okay, so I'll answer that for Brianna and Andrea, Dr. Balcom can answer as well. But I then had to work in private practice and I swore I never would. Like, in fact, even when we would do stuff, I'd be like, who wants to draw blood for my dog? Because I'm never doing this, ha, ha, ha. And then it crashed. But at Cornell, I mean, whatever, you're a vet. So you would have the training in it, but it wasn't like where my mindset was. So then all of a sudden I'm like in private practice working with Lisa at a fairly big practice. I did fine, but it was definitely an interesting, thing, but it also shows like we're all very smart and you can do more than you think you can. And to jump back, or even for me, like I went and I did mixed animal, then I switched to small animal. Then when I got hired at Delhi, I was the large animal vet, which I'm like, oh, that's cool. I haven't done that for 6 years. Like, that'll be fun. And so, but I did, and it's fine, like it's, things will work out, but was it scary and was it a little bit nervous? Yeah, but you make it work. And for education, for vets, DVMs, because we have a post-secondary education, we're not required to get further training in education because we're considered like whatever the higher end of that level of education.
Professionals.
Yeah. And we're teaching at a state school. So it's not like we're teaching at Harvard kind of thing or teaching at Cornell. Like I'm sure Cornell would have probably different, Cornell would make us do research. If we were working at Cornell, we'd have to be doing basic research in equine or in whatever the hell I do it in. I don't know, probably in sheep. I don't know, something. So, and I'm happy with that. Like I'm happy with I'm teaching the students. I don't have to do research. I love teaching and that's great. And I have great work-life balance. I get paid a lot less than my colleagues, but I think for dollar, I probably make similar to them because I also have summers off and winter break and, that break and like, oh, that holiday, you mean the one I don't have to work or in that holiday? And the one the time I'm not on call, you want me to call me at 2 a.m. for worms? Cool. I'm down with that. I wasn't angry that on call, like, what do you want? So I knew it wasn't right. It was time to leave private practice.
Yeah, and it's kind of, as you said, education wise, I had no formal education experience before I came here. For me, it was more just how life worked out a little bit. I was living in Andes, which if you guys know where that is, that's like 20 minutes away from Delhi towards like Kingston. And I was working in New Berlin, which if you know where that is, it's an hour and 15 minutes the other direction towards Utica. And I was doing large animal practice. I would have to sleep at the clinics, my nights on call. And then I had a baby and my husband started his own business that like exploded. We were originally going to move closer there, but his business was doing really well and making more money than I was making. So to ask him to relocate my financial support was tough. And literally, I was crying one morning as I was about to walk out the door for work because I didn't know how to do it and what I was going to do. And he went online and saw Delhi was advertising a faculty position and called me. And he's like, Delhi is advertising a faculty position. The application closes next week. And I was like, oh, so that's what happened. And it worked out so that my commute got shorter. It was a little harder for me to leave practice. I hadn't been practicing as long. And I really did enjoy it for the most part. On call, it varied. Definitely once a child got factored in on call, just went straight to the suck zone. When there weren't kids involved, it was a lot easier to handle because, you're just like on that high or whatever. So that's how I ended up here. It was more like, kind of having to make choices about family and life. And I don't regret it. I do enjoy it. There are things I miss. I do have a small practice I do, which is a little stupid and crazy of me sometimes, but it, but it kind of helps to tweak that urge or, getting to bring castrations in for advanced equine. I was,
you got work.
Tested off. There was blood, there was testicles flying and I was in my glory. So, and it was good times. But also like I hadn't done a dog spay or cat neuter since vet school. And any of you who have had the joy of scrubbing into surgery with me, figured it out. Every now and then Dr. Meckel or Dr. Lukowski needs to show up and hold my hand a little. It's getting better. But my first year here, I taught dentistry and surge after coming out of large animal practice.
I taught farm animal and surge, the surge lab.
Yeah.
I had been doing small animal at that time, but yeah. And that's the thing too, is like you learn so much that you can go into so many different things. So really just experience everything, anything that gives you a little inkling of a little drive, a little passion, a little like spark, really look into that, really investigate that and see if that's something that you would want to potentially explore. And again, it doesn't have to be forever, right? It's not like you're going to be married to your profession because you can move, you can change, you can do things, but it's going to be in your best interest to find something that intrinsically motivates you versus an extrinsic outside motivation. That's going to drive you throughout your career for the balance, for the work-life balance that Dr. Balcom has. and considering also what your work-life balance will be. What are you guys, because your generation is generally smarter than our generation as far as things go on with like, hey, we're gonna not do all that working part all the time. Like that makes sense. Whereas I was like, we're gonna work all the time. My husband's like, why do you work so hard? I'm like, because I can, right? And then that didn't work out a couple years ago. So be aware of that. Try to think it's not all about your profession. For me, like growing up, that was just kind of my profession and my career was what my value was. The value of me was in not my grades, because I didn't really get straight A's, but I got good grades. So that's how I valued myself. And that's the problem with when you come to school, especially you go to vet school and your value is on how well you perform academically. And then you just get put into like, that. And I was like, oh, right. So you have to figure out, then relearn what my value. My value is not in my grades. My value is not in my career or my profession. My value is not in my children, right? Trying to figure out what you value. That's a midlife unending journey. But you're going to remember this conversation like, oh, that's what she's talking about, right? So try and think of all those things and what's going to end you up in 20 years kind of in the best position. That you're not, you don't want to be working all the time potentially, or maybe you do.
Anything else, guys? Any other questions or thoughts about anything dealing with, as I said, I'm a little rusty on the application process, but other than doing your research, thinking a little bit more outside the box, anything particular?
Cool. Well, if you guys think of anything, have any specific questions, just let us know. You can email both of us.
Thank you both for your time. It is very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
No
Thank
problem, guys.
you.
Have a great afternoon.